Hello, and welcome to NUFC Talk TV and another mighty win rant. Before we get this party started, all the usual like, share and subscribe malarkey that Chris is always bollocking me for not doing. To be fair, it is very important that you smash those like buttons in order to keep us growing and to get all this great free content, remember, free content out to as many tsunami as we can. Right, that's all done. So what's my rant today? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's the fact that the best team in the world, the first ever 4 times in a row title winners and current European treble champions, just like Newcastle United, cannot win a must-win game. We never seem to be able to do it, and even the great Man City, when tasked to do it on our behalf, fail miserably. Remember that word, miserably. Meaning that we don't qualify for Europe and our season is now well and truly over. So now the dust has settled and the season is well and truly over, how do I rate season 23-24? Well, there's a lot of ways to look at it. And there's a lot of subjective aspects to consider. So this is my own personal subjective opinion. First of all, I think everybody has to agree that it's impossible to judge this season's Newcastle performance without taking injuries into consideration. And of course, the Tonali situation. Last season, with a squad of what was basically Bruce's remnants, with some excellent signings in both windows, don't get us wrong, yeah, but we reached the cup final and the Champions League in what was comfortably the most enjoyable season I've ever enjoyed as a Newcastle supporter. One of the main reasons why it was so enjoyable was because we actually overachieved. Whether you like it or not, we did overachieve. Everybody surely has to agree that what we achieved was more than could have been expected under the circumstances, for a variety of reasons. First of all, Eddie got the absolute best out of every player he came across. He coached them all to be much better. We even got a purple patch out of Mickey, for fuck's sake. And our overperformance last season, compared to Spurs, Chelsea and Liverpool all underperforming, and Aston Villa, who were in kind of the same position we were, but starting from a much higher base because the initial squad that Emery inherited was far better than Eddie's squad was. So from a much higher base, we even outperformed them. So that was why last season was such a pure joy. So how are we going to match that? Well, for a start, Chelsea, Spurs, Liverpool all spent massively in the summer. Comfortably outspent us in the summer, where we essentially bought 2 players, Tonali and Barnes. We did buy Tino and Lewis Hall, but they were for the future. But Tonali and Barnes were the 2 who were going to go straight into the first team. Tonali was going to go straight in for Longstaff, most people thought, and Barnes was going to come in whilst Gordon gradually improved and developed to become the player that he's actually already become this season in Barnes' absence. My player of the season by a country mile, Anthony Gordon. On top of that, last season, J7 was my player of the season. This season, he's been missing half the time, which gets back to the injuries. Same with Pope, same with Botman. I think it's completely ridiculous not to take injuries into account when you're trying to evaluate how well we've done this season. Also, how well you've done in a season depends on what metrics you use. If you take those injuries into account and say, well, those injuries are part of the season, then you could argue it's been a poor season because the injuries were a part of it. And that's one way to look at it, because, of course, they've had a massive effect. Last season we got to a cup final. This season we could have got to a cup final. We could have got the final stages of the Champions League. All ifs and buts. Back to the old 10 games in 30 days in December that really killed off this season for us. But if you think about it logically, with the same squad that we had the previous season, we're then asking the same players to play additional games, some of them at a much higher level. And we're competing against teams who went on to strengthen their squads, the ones that had performed so poorly last season. And all things considered, even those injuries to that decimated squad, we've ended up only 3 places lower. And in 8 out of 10 seasons, 8 out of the last 10 seasons, that would have got us in the Champions League, 7th place. We'd be looking at a whole season in a different light if Man City had done us a favour in the cup final. Because at least with the season we've had, injuries included, we would have still been in Europe. Everybody would have, hey, is this the way to Lithuania, Bosnia and Herzegovina? But we're not, sadly. Had a few verses of that written out. But anyway, we didn't. So there we are. Now then, a lot of people were arguing before the cup final that they wouldn't mind Manure winning. And us not being in Europe, because they argued that we're not quite ready for it. And the less games means we can concentrate on getting back in the Champions League next season. And I can sort of understand where they're coming from. But I don't agree for a couple of reasons. One, you've got to get experience of playing twice a week, Wednesday, Saturday, Thursday, Sunday, whatever it might be. And you only get experience by doing it. And two, what happens in the summer window could have a huge bearing on how we look back at this season. And what I mean by that is, if our failure to get into Europe's bottom table, let alone the top table of the Champions League, if that results in us not being able to hang on to Bruno and or Isaac, then this season has been an abysmal season. Because then, if that happens, when you're trying to recruit players in the summer, what can you offer them? When they can see that you're a club who sells your best player. How do you convince them that you're serious about winning major silverware? To me, it would mean that all the promise, growth and improvement that we've seen since the takeover is virtually gone. It'll turn a 5-year project into a 10-year project. It'll be exponentially more difficult to persuade elite players to come on board. And if that happens, then this season will have been a complete write-off. However, you know the mighty win. Always glass half full. If we can hang on to our best players, and this is why it's so important that we do, get rid of the deadwood, we all know who we're talking about. And if we can get through next season with even a normal, reasonable amount of injuries, and if we can bring in a couple of elite, first team ready, and that's the key, first team ready players, then with fewer games, as Spurs have proved this season, longer recovery training periods, and much greater squad rotation, then I honestly believe we could have a fantastic season next season. I honestly believe this season that with a fully fit squad, if everybody had been fit and available all season, give or take what injuries that you're going to get, comprising last season's best defence in the league, which it was, behind a Bruno J7 Tonali midfield, and a front three from Gordon, Barnes, Wilson, Miggy, Murphy, Isaac. We could have been challenging on 4 fronts until the very closing stages. And if that had happened, we wouldn't be in this somewhat miserable situation now. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly how I feel about this season. Somewhat miserable. Because following on from the still trophyless, but nevertheless unadulterated joy of last season, the football gods, as they have done for 60 years since I've been going to watch the Toon, conspired once again to kick me in the nuts via Manchester City. Please like and subscribe, you know the drill. Hit the bell button to be notified of all our upcoming content. If you really enjoy what we do and you want to help support the channel, become a member. For less than £3 a month, you'll get all the members' perks, which you'll see listed. So visit the website nufctalk.tv, nufctalk.tv. Thanks for watching. I'm out of here. How are the lads?